The black cat. From my infancy, I was known for my gentle and affectionate disposition. My parents indulged my love for animals, and as I grew older, my fondness for them only deepened. I married young, and my wife shared my sentiments. Our house was filled with a variety of pets, but none were dearer to me than Pluto, a large, intelligent, entirely black cat. Pluto and I shared a special bond. He followed me wherever I went and seemed to understand my every mood. For years, this companionship brought me joy. However, as the curse of intemperance overtook my being, my temperament darkened. Alcohol consumed my days and clouded my judgment. The tenderness that once defined my nature eroded into irritability and violence. My wife bore my abuse with silent sorrow, but Pluto was not so fortunate. One evening, after a night of drunken revelry, I returned home in a stupor. Pluto approached me as he always did, but in my intoxicated state, I mistook his affection for an intrusion. Enraged, I seized him violently. The frightened creature bit my hand in defense. A fury unlike any I had ever known took hold of me. My soul burned with unholy rage. I grasped a penknife from my pocket and, with unspeakable cruelty, gouged out one of Pluto's eyes. The next morning, the sight of my poor, mutilated pet filled me with horror and regret. But the damage was done. Over the following weeks, Pluto recovered but regarded me with profound terror. His avoidance enraged me further. A perverse spirit, an impulse I could neither resist nor comprehend, urged me to commit an even greater atrocity. I slipped a noose around Pluto's neck and hung him from the limb of a tree. I wept as I performed the deed, yet I could not stop myself. That night, as I lay in a drunken stupor, I awoke to the roar of flames. Our house was ablaze. My wife and I barely escaped with our lives, yet the destruction was total. The next day, amidst the charred remains, I discovered something peculiar. On the only surviving wall, there was the faint outline of a cat suspended by its neck. The sight haunted me, yet I dismissed it as mere coincidence. Time passed, and I grew restless. A deep emptiness gnawed at me. One night, while drinking in a tavern, I encountered another black cat. This one was strikingly similar to Pluto, save for a white patch on its chest. It followed me home, and my wife took an immediate liking to it. At first I welcomed its company, but soon a deep unease set in. The cat was missing an eye, just like Pluto. The more I tried to avoid it, the more it sought my presence. A nameless dread filled my heart. As the days turned to weeks, my torment deepened. The white patch on the cat's chest seemed to take shape, growing into the image of a gallows. I was pursued by a relentless nightmare. The cat was always near, always watching. In my growing madness, I sought escape. One day, in the depths of our cellar, the creature followed us. My fury boiled over. In a fit of rage, I seized an axe, intending to end its existence. As I swung, my wife intervened. The blade buried itself into her skull. She collapsed at my feet lifeless. The horror of my deed sobered me, but panic quickly took hold. I had to conceal the body. The thick stone walls of the cellar provided the perfect hiding place. With grim determination, I walled her corpse behind the bricks. The deed done, I searched for the cursed cat, but it had vanished. For the first time in months I felt relief. Days passed, and no suspicion fell upon me. The police came, but my calm demeanor dissuaded them. However, as they prepared to leave, I grew arrogant. I tapped on the very wall that concealed my wife, boasting of its sturdy construction. To my horror, an unearthly wailing arose from within. A howling cry of the damned. The officers tore down the bricks, revealing my wife's decomposing body, and perched upon her head was the infernal black cat. The creature had outwitted me. My guilt was exposed. I surrendered to my fate, condemned to death. As I pen these final words, I acknowledge my own descent into the abyss. It was not I who brought about my undoing. It was the spirit of perverseness that dwelled within me, a force beyond comprehension. And so, as the hour of my reckoning draws near, I bid farewell to this world. The black cat watches me still, its one eye gleaming in the darkness of my cell. At Kanchaknapang R6F. May you never know the horrors that haunt my soul.
Title: The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. Expanded version? In the quiet and mysterious glen of Sleepy Hollow, nestled along the eastern banks of the Hudson River, there lived a lanky, superstitious schoolmaster named Ichabod Crane. Tall and gangly, with a long nose and awkward limbs, Ichabod had an insatiable curiosity and an even greater appetite, particularly for the supernatural tales that haunted the secluded valley. Sleepy Hollow was a place unlike any other. It was said to be under some bewitching spell that lulled its inhabitants into a perpetual dreamlike state, where specters and spirits roamed freely. Of all the ghostly apparitions said to wander the valley, none was as fearsome as the Headless Horseman, a phantom rider who was believed to be the restless spirit of a Hessian soldier who had lost his head to a cannonball during the Revolutionary War. The spectre was said to ride through the night in search of his missing head, galloping furiously through the darkness, bound to vanish before dawn's first light. Ichabod, despite his pretentious airs and fondness for ghost stories, was not a man of courage. However, his ambitions extended beyond the humble schoolhouse where he instructed the local children. He had set his sights on Katrina van Tassel, the beautiful and wealthy daughter of a prosperous Dutch farmer. Katrina was the belle of the valley, with golden curls and a coquettish charm that ensnared many suitors. Among them was the brawny and boisterous Brom Bones, a man who was as fearless as Ichabod was timid. The rivalry between Ichabod and Brom Bones for Katrina's affection was fierce, though it was clear to many that Brom had the advantage. While Ichabod relied on his wit and genteel manner to woo Katrina, Brom employed his strength, charm, and mischievous pranks to belittle his lanky opponent. The townsfolk watched with amusement as Brom devised clever schemes to humiliate Ichabod, setting traps and orchestrating scares to rattle the nervous schoolmaster. One fateful autumn evening, Baltus van Tassel, Katrina's father, hosted a grand harvest feast at his bountiful estate. The celebration was a spectacle of merriment, with tables overflowing with roasted meats, spiced pies, and mugs of frothy cider. The valley's residents gathered to dance, laugh, and share tales of Sleepy Hollow's haunting past. Among the stories exchanged that night, the legend of the Headless Horseman was retold with renewed vigor, sending shivers down the spines of all who listened. Ichabod, enthralled by the eerie narratives, lingered at the party longer than he intended. When the revelry waned, he reluctantly mounted his old, borrowed horse, Gunpowder, and set off through the shadowy woods toward his lodgings. The night was eerily still, with the moon casting ghostly beams through the gnarled branches. Every rustling leaf and distant hoot of an owl seemed to whisper of lurking phantoms. As Ichabod neared the ominous bridge by the church, where the horseman was rumored to appear, his heart pounded like a drum. Then, out of the gloom, a dark figure emerged. A towering rider astride a massive black steed blocked Ichabod's path. His worst fears materialized. The rider bore no head upon his shoulders but held a spectral pumpkin under his arm. With a blood-curdling shriek, Ichabod spurred Gunpowder into a desperate gallop. The horseman pursued him with unearthly speed, his hooves thundering against the earth. Ichabod's breath came in ragged gasps as he neared the bridge, for he recalled that the spirit could not cross its threshold. Victory was within his grasp, until the horseman raised his pumpkin head and hurled it toward Ichabod. The next morning, Gunpowder was found grazing near the schoolhouse, but Ichabod Crane had vanished. The only traces of his presence were his hat and the shattered remains of a pumpkin. The townsfolk speculated about his fate. Some believed he had fled in terror, never to return, while others whispered that the horseman had claimed another victim. Katrina soon married Brombones, who, whenever the tale was recounted, would smirk knowingly, leading many to suspect he had orchestrated the frightful encounter. But whether Ichabod's disappearance was the work of an earthly prankster or a spectral rider remains a mystery forever entwined with the legend of Sleepy Hollow. At Kanchaknapong R6F. Title: Carmilla. Expanded version? In the quiet solitude of a secluded castle deep within the forests of Styria, young Laura lived under the care of her father, a retired English officer. Their existence was peaceful, though tinged with loneliness, as the castle was removed from the bustling world beyond the dense woods that surrounded it. Life in the castle was structured and uneventful, yet it took a sudden and mysterious turn with the arrival of a strange and beautiful guest. It began with an accident, or so it seemed. One evening, as Laura and her father took their usual walk along the castle grounds, a grand carriage drawn by black horses came hurtling down the forest path. The horses reared, and the carriage came to an abrupt halt. A noblewoman within, cloaked in finery, stepped out in a state of distress. She explained that she was in urgent travel and that her daughter, a delicate young woman named Carmilla, had suddenly fallen ill. With apparent reluctance but great urgency, the lady implored Laura's father to take Carmilla into his care, promising to return for her daughter once her travels were completed. Laura's father, moved by the desperate plea, agreed. Thus, Carmilla became a guest at the castle. She was a vision of dark beauty, with long flowing hair, piercing eyes, and a presence that seemed almost otherworldly. From the moment she arrived, Laura felt drawn to her with an inexplicable intensity. Carmilla, too, seemed to return Laura's affections, often gazing at her with an almost predatory fascination. The two spent hours together, exchanging stories, walking along the moonlit castle grounds, and whispering secrets by candlelight. Yet, there was something unsettling about Carmilla. She was prone to fits of melancholy and strange absences. She despised hymns and religious symbols, and she never joined the household for morning prayers. At night, Laura began experiencing terrifying dreams, visions of a shadowy figure looming over her bed, pressing upon her chest, filling her with a sensation of dread and suffocation. Each morning, she awoke weak and feverish, with mysterious puncture wounds on her neck. Her father, troubled by her declining health, sought the advice of doctors, but none could provide an answer. Meanwhile, eerie rumors spread through the village. Young women were falling ill under similar circumstances, wasting away as though drained by some unseen force. Their deaths left the villagers in terror, whispering of a dark presence that stalked the night. It was during this time that Laura's father received an unexpected visitor, a general who had once been a friend of the family. The man was tormented by grief, for he had recently lost his beloved niece to a strange and cruel affliction. He had witnessed, with his own eyes, a phantom in the form of a beautiful woman visiting his niece at night, only to vanish before dawn. When he described the creature, Laura and her father exchanged uneasy glances. His description matched Carmilla perfectly. Determined to uncover the truth, the general led Laura, her father, and a group of villagers to an abandoned crypt in the depths of the forest, where an ancient noble family had been buried. There, in a stone coffin, lay Carmilla, her body untouched by time, her beauty unchanged, as though she merely slept. Horror gripped them as they realized the truth. Carmilla was no mortal woman, but a vampire who had preyed upon the innocent for centuries. With great reluctance, the ritual was performed. Carmilla's heart was pierced, and her body was burned, putting an end to her reign of terror. As the flames consumed her, Laura felt a deep, inexplicable sorrow, for despite everything, she had loved Carmilla in some strange, inescapable way. Though Carmilla was gone, her presence lingered in Laura's mind like a haunting melody. The nightmares ceased, and her strength gradually returned, but a part of her remained lost in the memory of those moonlit nights and whispered confessions. Love and horror had intertwined, leaving behind a tale that would never be forgotten. At Kanchaknapong R6F.